The challenge came during the morning session on the 6th day. Dai Jung was speaking about trade regulations when High Commander Rethval stood abruptly. His forearms spread wide and his voice boomed across the council chamber. "Enough," Rethval roared. "I will tolerate this human's insults no longer." The chamber fell silent. Every species turned to watch. Daejung remained standing at the speaker's platform, his expression calm. "High Commander," the council speaker said nervously, "please explain your objection through proper channels." "No," Rethval declared. "This matter is beyond politics. It is about honor, about respect for the traditions that have guided the council for thousands of years." He pointed one massive finger at Daejung. "This human has violated every principle of civilized behavior. He mocks our laws. He refuses proper deference. He insults our cultural practices." "I have followed every rule of the council," Daejung replied evenly. "If the High Commander has specific complaints, I would be happy to address them." "Specific complaints?" Rethval's face darkened to almost black with rage. "You arrive armed like a savage. You twist our laws to serve your purposes. You refuse direct commands from your superiors. You show no respect for those who have earned their place through centuries of strength." "I show respect to those who respect me in return," Daejung said. "Respect is not the same as submission." Around the chamber, aliens whispered to each other. Some looked uncomfortable. Others appeared fascinated by the confrontation. "Then let us settle this matter in the traditional way," Rethval declared. "I invoke the Kaldesh, the ancient right of the Velthari people. I challenge you, Captain Kim, to single combat. Let us prove which species deserves respect." The council speaker looked panicked. "High Commander, the Kaldesh is a serious matter. Are you certain?" "I am certain," Rethval said. His eyes, all four of them, were fixed on Daejung. Let the human prove his strength or let him admit his weakness. Daejung felt the weight of every eye in the chamber on him. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The trap the Velthari had been constructing since humanity first arrived. If he refused, humanity would be branded as cowards. The council membership would be denied, and Earth would remain isolated from galactic society. Everything they had worked for would be lost. If he accepted, he would have to fight a creature with twice his mass, forearms, and weapons that could cut through steel. The odds of survival were not good. The odds of victory were even worse. Commander Song stood from the human section, her face pale. She was about to object, to try to find a legal way out. Daejung caught her eye and shook his head slightly. "No." He turned back to Rethval. "I accept your challenge, High Commander." The chamber erupted in chaos. Species shouted in dozens of languages. The council speaker called for order, his voice lost in the noise. "However," Daejung continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, "since I am the challenged party, I claim the right to choose the weapons." The chamber quieted. This was traditional under Velthari custom. The challenged always chose the weapons. Rethval smiled, a gesture that showed too many teeth. "Choose whatever weapons you wish, human. It will make no difference." "Combat knives," Daejung said clearly. "Traditional blades. No energy weapons. No shields. No armor beyond basic clothing." The smile faded from Rethval's face. "You would face me with primitive steel?" "You said the Velthari value honor and direct combat," Daejung replied. Surely the High Commander is not afraid of simple blades. Now it was Rethval who was trapped. If he objected, he would look cowardly. If he accepted, he would be fighting with weapons he had no experience using. Plasma blades were ceremonial for the Velthari, symbols of status. They had fought with energy weapons for so long that traditional melee combat was almost forgotten. "I accept," Rethval growled. "We fight at sunset in the arena of judgment." "Prepare yourself, human." The session ended early. As Daejung left the chamber, his crew surrounded him. "Sir, this is insane," Commander Song said. "You can't beat him in single combat. He's twice your size." "Size isn't everything," Daejung replied. "He has 4 arms. Which means 4 limbs to target." Dr. Han was nearly in tears. "Captain, the Velthari evolved on a low-gravity world. They're stronger than humans. Their bones are denser. Their reflexes are faster. But they don't know how to knife fight," Daejung said. "They've relied on energy weapons and reach for thousands of years. They've forgotten how to kill with their hands." Back in their quarters, Master Sergeant Quan was already preparing. He had laid out 2 matched combat knives on a table, checking their edges and balance. "These are good weapons," Quan said. 7 inches, double-edged, proper weight. They'll serve you well if you remember your training. I remember, Daejung said. They spent the next several hours reviewing techniques. Quan acted as Rethval, using extra weights on his arms to simulate the alien's greater strength. They practiced over and over, with Daejung learning to work around the reach advantage, to target weak points, to use the Velthari's own momentum against him. His lower arms will be weaker, Quan observed. He'll lead with his upper arms because they're stronger. That leaves his lower torso exposed. And his legs, Daejung added. He's taller, which means his center of gravity is higher. If I can unbalance him, the fight's over, Quan finished. Good, you're thinking tactically. Lieutenant Jiwon appeared with intelligence data. I've analyzed every recording of Velthari combat I could find. They rely heavily on overhead strikes and power moves. They're not used to opponents who can get inside their guard. Because most species they fight are similar in size, Daejung said. Humans are smaller. That's an advantage if I use it right. As sunset approached, the entire delegation gathered. Even the civilian diplomats had come to see him off. Ambassador Mi-sun looked worried but determined. Whatever happens today, she said, you've already shown the galaxy that humanity won't be pushed around. That matters. I'd rather show them by winning, Daejung replied with a slight smile. Commander Song handed him a flask of water. Don't do anything stupid, sir. I'll do whatever it takes to win, he said. That's different from stupid. The arena of judgment was ancient, built by the Velthari thousands of years ago. It was circular, with steep walls and seats rising on all sides. The floor was smooth stone, stained dark by centuries of spilled blood. When Daejung entered, the stands were packed. Every species on the council had sent representatives. Some came to watch humanity fail. Others came hoping to see the impossible happen. Rethval was already there, standing in the center of the arena. He wore simple fighting clothes that left his forearms free. His purple skin seemed to glow in the setting sun. Beside him on a table were two combat knives identical to the ones Daejung carried. Daejung walked to the center of the arena. Up close, Rethval was even more intimidating. His forearms flexed, each one thicker than Daejung's leg. His face showed no fear, only anticipation. Last chance to withdraw, Rethval said quietly. I will make it quick and merciful. No mercy necessary, Daejung replied. Let's get this done. A Velthari judge explained the rules. The fight continued until one fighter yielded, was unable to continue, or died. No outside interference was permitted. The result would be binding under council law. Take your weapons, the judge commanded. Both fighters picked up their knives. Rethval held one in each of his upper hands, leaving his lower arms free. Daejung held one knife in his right hand, the other reversed in his left. Begin. For 5 seconds, neither fighter moved. They circled each other slowly, each studying the other's stance. Daejung kept his knees slightly bent, his weight balanced, ready to move in any direction. Then Rethval attacked. He was fast, faster than Daejung expected. His upper arms came down in powerful overhead strikes. Both knives aimed at Daejung's head and chest. At the same time, his lower arms reached out to grab and hold. Daejung dropped and rolled left, coming up inside Rethval's reach. His knife flashed out, cutting a shallow line across the Velthari's lower ribs. Purple blood welled up. Rethval roared and spun, one massive arm smashing into Daejung's side. The impact sent him flying. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his ribs. One of them was definitely cracked. He forced himself to roll as Rethval's foot slammed down where his head had been a second before. Stone cracked from the impact. Daejung came up gasping. Rethval charged again, more cautious now. They exchanged strikes, knives clashing. The sound of metal on metal rang across the arena. Daejung gave ground steadily, letting Rethval drive him back. He was learning the Velthari's patterns. The way he led with his upper right arm, the way his lower left arm always reached for grappling holds. More importantly, he was learning Rethval's weaknesses. The Velthari was strong and fast, but he had no training in knife combat. He used his blades like clubs, relying on strength rather than skill, and he was already breathing hard from the exertion. Low-gravity worlds produced strong creatures, but they lacked endurance. Rethval had probably never fought for more than a few minutes at a time before. Daejung had trained to fight for hours if necessary, so Daejung waited. He defended, he evaded. He let Rethval waste his strength on attacks that came close but didn't connect. Small cuts accumulated on both fighters, against odds that would have destroyed weaker species. We fought ourselves for thousands of years. The second day began badly and got worse. Daijung woke to find that the human delegation's quarters had been moved during the night. They were now in a section of the station that was farther from the council chamber and closer to the waste processing facilities. The smell was noticeable. Coincidence? Commander Song asked as they walked to the morning session. There are no coincidences in politics, Daijung replied. When they arrived at the council chamber, they found their assigned seats had been changed too. Instead of the corner position they had yesterday, they were now in the back row, behind a structural pillar that blocked their view of half the chamber. Dr. Han checked the seating arrangements on her datapad. This violates protocol. New members are supposed to have clear sight lines. File a complaint, Daijung said, but do it quietly. We don't want to look petty. The morning session was about trade agreements and tariffs. It should have been boring technical discussion, but the Velthari turned it into an attack on humanity. High Commander Rethival proposed a new regulation that would require all new council members to prove their economic stability before participating in galactic trade. Some species, Rethival said, not looking at the human section but making his target obvious, may not have the resources or infrastructure to engage in proper commerce. It would be irresponsible to allow them full trading rights before we verify their capabilities. It was brilliantly done. Rethival wasn't directly insulting humanity. He was just raising reasonable concerns about unproven species. But everyone in the chamber understood the real message. Several species voiced support for the proposal. These were the ones Lieutenant Ji-Wan had identified as Velthari allies, species that depended on the Empire for protection or trade. Daijung stood to respond. The human delegation appreciates the High Commander's concern for economic stability. Perhaps the Council could review the economic data of all member species. To ensure everyone meets these new standards, there was a ripple of nervous laughter. Several older species had economic problems that they preferred not to discuss publicly. Rethival's expression darkened, but he couldn't object without looking hypocritical. Ambassador Mi Sun Shin, who led the Human Civilian Diplomatic Corps, added from beside Daijung, "Humanity would be happy to share our economic records. We have nothing to hide." The proposal was tabled for further study, which was political language for quietly forgotten. It was a small victory, but victories mattered. During the lunch break, Ambassador Tekrin of the Kurix approached again. "The Velthari are putting pressure on neutral species," the insectoid said quietly. "They're calling in old debts and making threats. They want to isolate humanity." "How many species are listening to them?" Daijung asked. "Too many," Tekrin admitted. "The Velthari control access to key trade routes and technologies. Most species can't afford to oppose them openly, but you're talking to us." "The Kurix remember what it was like to be new to the Council," Tekrin said. "The Velthari were less subtle in those days. They conquered 3 of our colony worlds before we agreed to join the Council and accept their protection." The translator somehow conveyed bitterness in that last word. "I'm sorry," Daijung said. "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Tekrin's antennae twitched. "The Velthari respect only strength. If you show weakness, they will crush you. But if you stand firm, others will notice. Some may even find their courage." After Tekrin left, Lieutenant Ji-Wan pulled up her analysis. "He's right, sir. The Velthari are working behind the scenes. They've convinced at least 15 species to vote against any proposals we make. Then we need to make proposals they can't oppose," Daijung said. The afternoon session proved even more difficult. Every time the human delegation tried to speak, procedural objections were raised. Their microphones mysteriously malfunctioned twice. When Daijung finally got to address the Council about humanitarian aid to a struggling species, his translator cut out halfway through, making his speech sound like nonsense. By the end of the day, Daijung was furious. Not the hot anger of a young soldier, but the cold, calculated fury of a commander who knew he was being played. Back in their relocated quarters, the human team gathered to discuss strategy. "They're trying to break us down," Commander Song said. "Small insults and inconveniences. Death by 1,000 cuts. It's working," Dr. Han admitted. "Some of the civilian delegates are getting scared. They're talking about accepting a subordinate position in the Council just to end the harassment." "No," Daijung said firmly. "That's exactly what the Velthari want. Once we accept a subordinate role, we'll never escape it." "Then what do we do?" Mi Sun asked. The civilian ambassador looked exhausted. "We can't fight them, Captain. We don't have the military or economic power." "We don't need to fight them," Daijung replied. We need to make fighting us more expensive than accepting us. Over the next 3 days, the pattern continued. The Velthari kept up their pressure campaign. More procedural obstacles, more technical difficulties, more subtle insults and slights. They were systematic and relentless, but Dae-jung was patient. While the Velthari focused on making life difficult, Lieutenant Ji-won and her team worked quietly behind the scenes. They analyzed voting patterns. They identified which species were genuinely allied with the Velthari and which were just afraid. They found pressure points and opportunities. The Naldine need medical technology, Ji-won reported. Earth has advanced genetic therapy that could help with a plague affecting their homeworld. If we offer to share that technology, they might become real allies instead of just sympathetic. Do it, Dae-jung approved. The Torvesh are the Council's peacekeepers, Ji-won continued. They're supposed to be neutral, but they're getting tired of the Velthari using them as a political tool. If we support their independence publicly, they might remember it. Add it to tomorrow's talking points. Slowly, carefully, humanity began building relationships. Not alliances yet, but connections. Species that would at least listen when humans spoke. Species that might abstain from votes against humanity rather than actively opposing them. It wasn't much, but it was something. On the 5th day, something changed. Dae-jung was walking back from a private meeting with the Naldine ambassador when he noticed he was being followed. 3 Velthari soldiers in full armor moving through the corridors behind him. He didn't run or change his pace. Master Sergeant Kwan had taught him long ago that showing fear invited attack. Instead, he walked calmly until he reached a more populated area, then turned to face his followers. They stopped, making no attempt to hide now. One of them stepped forward and spoke in broken human language. High Commander won't speak. You come now. I'd be happy to meet with the High Commander, Dae-jung replied, during normal diplomatic hours with proper notice. You come now, the soldier repeated. Dae-jung's hand moved casually to rest near one of his visible knives. No, the 3 soldiers tensed. Around them, other species stopped to watch. The corridor grew quiet. High Commander, give order, the soldier insisted. The High Commander is not my superior officer, Dae-jung said clearly. If he wants to meet, he can send a formal request through proper channels. I'm a captain in the human fleet, not a servant to be summoned. The soldiers looked at each other, uncertain. This clearly wasn't how the encounter was supposed to go. After a long moment, they turned and left. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By evening, half the council knew that the human captain had refused a direct summons from High Commander Rethval. Opinions were divided. Some thought Dae-jung was brave. Others thought he was suicidal. Commander Song definitely leaned toward the second opinion. Sir, you're provoking them. They're provoking me, Dae-jung corrected. I'm just refusing to be provoked. That's not how the Velthari will see it. I know. That night, Dae-jung couldn't sleep. He stood in his quarters looking out at the alien stars beyond the station and thought about everything that had happened. The constant pressure, the political games, the barely veiled threats. He thought about Admiral Park's orders. Don't start a war, but don't let them walk over us. He thought about Master Sergeant Kwan's training, the knives hidden across his body, the thousands of hours practicing to kill efficiently and quickly. Most of all, he thought about what humanity represented. They were new to the galaxy, weak by comparison to ancient empires like the Velthari, but they had survived things that would have destroyed other species. Ice ages and plagues and wars that consumed entire continents. They had split the atom and reached the stars despite every obstacle. Humans were survivors. The door chimed. Dae-jung turned to find Dr. Han standing there looking nervous. Captain, I've been studying Velthari culture, she said. There's something you need to know. When they feel their honor has been insulted beyond acceptable levels, they invoke something called the Kaldesh. It's an ancient tradition. What kind of tradition? Dae-jung asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Trial by combat, Dr. Han said quietly. Single combat between the insulted party and the one who insulted them. It's legally binding under council law as a cultural practice. If challenged and you refuse, humanity will be branded as cowards and denied council membership. And if I accept? The Grand Rotunda of Velthar Prime was even more impressive from the inside. The ceiling stretched hundreds of meters above, covered in holographic displays showing stars and planets. The walls curved in perfect circles with seats arranged in tiers for each member species. At the center was an open floor where speakers would stand to address the assembly. Dai-Jung walked down the main corridor toward the chamber, his boots clicking on the polished stone floor. His crew followed in formation behind him. Velthari guards lined both sides of the corridor, standing at attention with their plasma blades at their hips. Each guard was at least 2 meters tall, their purple skin marked with ceremonial scars. They were meant to intimidate. Dae-Jung kept his eyes forward and his pace steady. Dr. Han walked beside him, whispering last-minute advice. Remember, address the council as honored assembly. Don't make direct eye contact with the Velthari for too long. It's considered a challenge. Noted, Dae-Jung replied. They reached the massive doors of the council chamber. 2 guards stepped forward to open them, and the sound of dozens of alien voices washed over them. Dae-Jung paused for just a moment, taking in the sight. 47 different species, each seated in their designated area. Some were humanoid, others were insectoid or aquatic or stranger things Dae-Jung had no names for. Translators hummed in the air, converting speech into languages everyone could understand. All conversation stopped when the human delegation entered. Dae-Jung walked to the center of the floor, his head high. He could feel thousands of eyes watching him. More importantly, he could feel the weight of the knives hidden across his body. They were a secret and a promise. A security checkpoint stood between him and the speaker's platform. It was a simple archway with scanning equipment, designed to detect weapons. A Velthari security officer stood beside it, his expression bored. Dae-Jung approached the scanner and stepped through. Immediately, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the archway. The security officer's expression changed from bored to alert in an instant. More guards appeared from side doors, their hands moving to their weapons. Stop, the security officer commanded in heavily accented human language. You carry weapons? Yes, Dae-Jung replied calmly. I do. The entire chamber erupted in noise. Aliens stood from their seats shouting questions and objections. The Velthari section was the loudest, with High Commander Rethaval rising to his full height, his face darkening to a deep purple color. This is an outrage. Rethaval's voice boomed across the chamber. The Concordat clearly states that no weapons are permitted in council space. Dae-Jung pulled out his datapad and held it up. With respect, High Commander, the Concordat of Civilized Warfare, Section 7, Paragraph 3 specifically bans projectile-based armaments. I carry no projectile weapons. He slowly, deliberately drew one of his visible knives. The blade caught the light gleaming. Around the chamber, aliens gasped or made sounds of surprise in their own languages. These are simple blades, Dae-Jung continued. Traditional weapons that have been used by my species for thousands of years. They are not projectile weapons. They comply completely with the letter of the Concordat. Rethaval's forearms trembled with rage. You mock us. This violates the spirit of the treaty. Does it? Dae-Jung asked. His voice remained calm, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. Humanity did not write this treaty. We were not consulted when it was drafted. We were not given a vote when it was approved. We are simply following the rules that were established before we arrived. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around the chamber, some species were nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. If the Concordat is unclear, Dae-Jung continued, if it needs to be amended to include all weapons rather than just projectile weapons, then humanity would be happy to participate in those negotiations. Of course, such negotiations could take months or even years, and during that time, humanity's admission to the council would need to be postponed. The trap was perfect, and everyone in the chamber saw it. The Velthari had spent enormous political capital to get the Concordat approved. If they demanded it be changed now, they would lose face with the other species. If they tried to delay humanity's admission, they would reveal that the Concordat had always been about controlling humanity specifically. Rethaval stood frozen, his forearms clenched into fists. Around him, other Velthari delegates whispered urgently. The High Commander's eyes, all 4 of them, focused on Dae-Jung with pure hatred. Finally, a voice spoke from another section of the chamber. It was strange and clicking, translated through the chamber's systems. The human speaks correctly. The Concordat bans projectile weapons. It does not ban all weapons. Dae-Jung turned to see which species had spoken. It was one of the Kuriks, an insectoid species with multiple eyes and delicate antennae. The translator identified the speaker as Ambassador Tekrin. "Thank you, Ambassador," Daejung said, bowing slightly. Another voice joined in, this one gurgling through water-filled speakers. "The Naldine agree. If the law is unclear, it must be rewritten. But that is not the humans' fault." More voices added their support. Not all of them, and not enthusiastically, but enough. The message was clear. Some species were tired of the Velthari's dominance and saw humanity's challenge as refreshing. The council speaker, an elderly member of a species called the Torvesh, raised his gnarled hand for silence. "The human delegation has complied with the letter of the Concordat," he announced in a wheezing voice. "The session will proceed. Take your seats." Daejung bowed respectfully to the speaker and moved to the human section. It was small, just 5 seats in a corner of the chamber. His crew filed in behind him. As he sat, he noticed Commander Song's hand was shaking slightly. "That was insane," she whispered. "That was necessary," Daejung replied. High Commander Rethval finally sat down, but his posture was rigid with barely controlled fury. Throughout the opening ceremonies, Daejung could feel the Velthari's eyes on him. The first day of sessions was mostly procedural. Different species gave speeches welcoming humanity to the council. Daejung responded with a prepared statement, thanking them for the opportunity. It was boring and formal, exactly what diplomacy required. But beneath the boring surface, Daejung could feel the currents of power and politics. The way species grouped together, the careful language they used, the glances and gestures that carried meaning beyond words. During the first break, several species approached the human delegation privately. Ambassador Tekrin of the Kurix was first. "That was boldly done, Captain," the insectoid said through his translator. "The Velthari have needed someone to challenge them for some time." "We're not here to challenge anyone," Daejung replied carefully. "Just to represent humanity's interests." "Of course," Tekrin said. The translator somehow conveyed amusement. "But sometimes interests align. The Kurix would be interested in private discussions about trade agreements. We would welcome that," Daejung said. After Tekrin left, Dr. Han pulled Daejung aside. "Sir, 3 other species have made similar overtures. They want to meet privately. This is highly irregular for a first session." "They see an opportunity," Lieutenant Jiwan Choi observed. She had been taking notes throughout the session. "The Velthari have dominated council politics for decades. Now there's a new species willing to stand up to them. Others want to see if we're serious." "Are we serious?" Commander Song asked quietly. "Yes," Daejung said. "But we need to be smart about this. We can't afford to make the Velthari into permanent enemies. We need to show strength without pushing them into a corner. That's a narrow path to walk," Song said. "That's why they pay us the big credits," Daejung replied with a slight smile. The afternoon session was more substantial. The council debated trade routes through a disputed region of space. The Velthari argued for military patrols to enforce security. Several smaller species wanted neutral trade zones instead. Daejung listened carefully, saying nothing. He was learning the dynamics of the council. Which species had real power and which only pretended to. Which were allies and which were rivals. When the session finally ended for the day, High Commander Rethval approached the human section. Up close, he was even more imposing. His forearms were thick with muscle, his ceremonial plasma blades humming softly at his hips. "Captain Kim," Rethval said. His translator gave his voice a harsh, grating quality. "I would speak with you privately." Daejung stood. "Of course, High Commander." They moved to a side chamber away from the crowds. Dr. Han tried to follow, but Rethval blocked her with one of his massive arms. "Just the captain." Daejung nodded to Dr. Han that it was all right. She backed away reluctantly. In the side chamber, Rethval turned to face Daejung fully. In the smaller space, his size was even more overwhelming. This close, Daejung could smell something like copper and ozone coming from the alien skin. "You think you are clever," Rethval said quietly. His upper pair of eyes studied Daejung while his lower pair watched the doors. "You think your primitive blades make you strong." "I think humanity deserves respect," Daejung replied. "Just like any other species in the council." "Respect is earned through strength," Rethval said. "Through centuries of victory and dominance. Humanity has neither. Humanity has survived," Daejung countered. The shuttle ride to Velthar Prime would take 3 days through the Gateway network. 3 days that Daejung intended to use wisely. The small vessel hummed quietly as it traveled through folded space, carrying the human delegation toward their destiny. Daejung woke before dawn each morning, though dawn was meaningless in space. His internal clock kept Earth time out of habit. He would dress in simple training clothes and make his way to the cargo bay, which he had converted into a makeshift training area. Master Sergeant Quan was always there waiting for him. "Ready, sir?" the old soldier would ask. "Always," Daejung would reply. They started with the basics: draw, strike, return. Each knife had different weight and balance. Some were meant for throwing, flying through the air in a straight line. Others were for close work, sliding between ribs or cutting tendons. Daejung practiced with each one until his hands moved without thinking. "The Velthari are taller than humans," Quan said on the second morning, circling Daejung with a practice blade. "Longer reach. 4 arms instead of 2. "Which means they're used to controlling space around them," Daejung replied, ducking under a practice strike. "They rely on reach advantage. So how do you beat that?" Daejung moved inside Quan's guard, his practice knife touching the sergeant's ribs. "You don't let them use their reach." "Get close. Stay close," Quan grinned. "Good. Now do it again, faster." They trained for 2 hours each morning. Daejung's muscles burned and his hands developed new calluses, but each day his movements became smoother. More certain, the knives became extensions of his arms. On the second day, Commander Song joined them to watch. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, saying nothing. When the session ended, she followed Daejung to the mess hall. "You're serious about this," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Daejung replied simply. "You know they'll have weapons too. Energy shields. Plasma blades that can cut through steel." "I know." Song poured herself coffee, black and bitter. "Then help me understand, sir. Why are you preparing to fight?" "We're supposed to be negotiating." Daejung looked at her carefully. Bora Song was a good officer, smart and loyal. She deserved an honest answer. "Because strength isn't just about fighting," he said. "It's about being ready to fight. The Velthari need to see that we're not afraid, that we understand violence just as well as they do. And if it comes to actual fighting, then humanity will show them what thousands of years of warfare taught us." Daejung stood. "We're not the strongest species. We're not the fastest, but we're survivors, and survivors do whatever it takes to win." Song nodded slowly. "Just be careful, sir. Pride can be as dangerous as fear." After she left, Daejung spent time with Dr. Narration, learning the proper forms of address for different council species. The Velthari expected to be called by their full military titles. The insectoid Kuriks preferred simple names. The aquatic Naldine communicated as much through body language as words. "The council has 47 member species," Dr. Han explained, displaying holographic images of various aliens, each with their own culture and expectations. Making a mistake could insult someone accidentally. "What about the Velthari specifically?" Daejung asked. "What insults them?" "Weakness," Dr. Han replied immediately. "Cowardice, indirectness. They value direct confrontation and clear hierarchy. They see themselves as warrior philosophers, noble and civilized, but ultimately superior through strength. So they're arrogant." Dr. Han hesitated. "Yes, but their arrogance is backed by 2,000 years of military dominance. They've crushed 17 rebellions and won 34 major wars. They have the largest fleet and the most advanced weapons in known space. Except they've never fought humans," Daejung observed. "No," Dr. Han agreed. "They haven't." On the third day, Lieutenant Jiwon Choi called a meeting in the conference room. She had been working non-stop, analyzing every piece of intelligence they had on the Velthari and the Council. "I found something interesting," she said, pulling up documents on the display. "The Concordat of Civilized Warfare wasn't the Velthari's first attempt to control weapons in Council space." "What do you mean?" Daejung asked. 20 years ago, they proposed a similar treaty that would have banned energy weapons, Jiwon explained. "It failed because the other species saw it as an attempt by the Velthari to monopolize military power. So they learned from that," Daejung said. "This time they banned the weapons they don't use." "Exactly. And they framed it as a moral issue, civilized versus primitive warfare." Jiwon highlighted sections of old council debates. They convinced the other species that projectile weapons were barbaric, beneath the dignity of advanced civilizations, which gives them a huge advantage, Commander Song said. She had joined the meeting late. "Everyone else abandons their most effective weapons, but the Velthari get to keep theirs." "There's more," Jiwon continued. I traced their weapons purchases over the last decade. They've been buying up energy weapon technology from smaller species, patents, research data, manufacturing facilities. They're trying to create a monopoly. Daejung leaned back in his chair thinking. The picture was becoming clearer. The Velthari weren't just arrogant. They were strategic. They had spent decades positioning themselves as the dominant military power, and now they were using treaties and laws to cement that position. How many other species resent this? He asked. Hard to say, Jiwon replied. Most are too afraid of the Velthari to speak publicly, but there are rumors of private discontent. The Kruriks, the Naldine, even some of the smaller human-like species, they don't like being disarmed. Good, Daejung said. That gives us potential allies. Or it paints a target on our backs, Song warned. If we openly challenge the Velthari, we could end up isolated and vulnerable. We're already vulnerable, Daejung replied. We're a new species with a small fleet and no established alliances. The question isn't whether we're at risk. It's whether we're going to accept being pushed around from the start. The room was quiet. Everyone knew he was right. That afternoon, Daejung stood in his quarters, checking each knife one final time. He had memorized where each one was hidden, 2 in his boots, 1 at the small of his back, 3 along his forearms under his uniform sleeves, others in places he preferred not to think about too much but necessity demanded. The visible ones were the showpieces. A beautiful blade with a carved bone handle at his hip, another across his chest. These were meant to be seen, to send a message. Lieutenant Taeyang Lee, the shuttle pilot, announced over the intercom that they were approaching Velthar Prime. Daejung moved to the viewport and looked out at the planet below. It was impressive and terrifying in equal measure. The world was covered in massive cities and military installations. Orbital defense platforms surrounded it in concentric rings bristling with weapons. Energy shields flickered across the surface like aurora lights. Captain, Lee said nervously, we're being hailed by Velthari patrol ships. They want to escort us down. Accept their escort, Daejung replied calmly. 3 Velthari interceptors appeared on either side of the shuttle. They were sleek and deadly, their hulls covered in weapons ports. As they flew, the interceptors performed aggressive maneuvers, cutting in front of the shuttle, rolling over it, coming within meters of collision. Lee's hands tightened on the controls. Sir, they're trying to intimidate us. I know, Daejung said. Keep your course steady. Show them we don't scare easily. Lee nodded and kept the shuttle on a perfect trajectory, ignoring the Velthari theatrics. After a few minutes, the interceptors stopped their aggressive flying. It was a small victory, but it mattered. As they descended through the atmosphere, Daejung could see the grand rotunda where the council met. It was a massive structure, kilometers wide, built from materials that seemed to glow with their own light. Thousands of ships were docked around it, representing species from across the galaxy. We're really doing this, Commander Song said quietly, standing beside him. Yes, Daejung agreed. We really are. The shuttle landed on a designated platform. Through the viewport, Daejung could see a reception committee waiting. Dozens of Velthari soldiers in ceremonial armor, their plasma blades visible at their sides. At the center stood a figure taller than the rest, wearing purple robes that marked him as high rank. That must be High Commander Rethval, Dr. Han said. Then let's not keep him waiting, Daejung replied. He straightened his uniform, checking that his visible knives were properly displayed. Around him, his crew prepared themselves. They were nervous but determined. They were about to represent all of humanity on the galactic stage. The shuttle door opened. The air of Velthar Prime rushed in, warm and smelling of exotic metals. Daejung took a deep breath and stepped out into history. Captain Daejung Kim stood at attention in the briefing room of the UES Indomitable. The massive warship floated in orbit around Earth, its weapon systems powered down for the first time in months. Through the viewport behind Admiral Hyejin Park, Daejung could see the blue curve of his homeworld. It looked peaceful from up here. He knew better. At ease, Captain, Admiral Park said. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Sit down. We need to talk about your next assignment. Daejung sat. His dress uniform felt stiff and uncomfortable. He preferred combat gear, but today was different. Today was about politics, not war. The Admiral activated a holographic display. Images of alien ships and worlds appeared in the air between them. 3 months ago, the Galactic Council sent us an invitation. They want humanity to join the Interstellar Diplomatic Assembly. That's good news, isn't it? Taejung asked. It should be, Park replied. Her expression said otherwise. But there's a problem. A big one. She changed the display. Now it showed a tall, purple-skinned alien with 4 arms and cruel eyes. This is High Commander Rethval of the Velthari Empire. They're the strongest military power in the known galaxy. They've been members of the Council for over 2,000 years. Taejung studied the alien's face. He had learned to read hostility in many forms during his career. This creature radiated it. The Velthari proposed a new treaty 6 months before we received our invitation, the Admiral continued. It's called the Concordat of Civilized Warfare. Sounds nice, doesn't it? What does it do? Taejung asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. It bans all projectile weapons within diplomatic zones and on council worlds. No guns, no missiles, no railguns. Nothing that throws metal. Park's voice was flat. The council approved it unanimously. We weren't members yet, so we didn't get a vote. Taejung felt his jaw tighten. Humanity's entire military doctrine was built around kinetic weapons. Railguns, coil guns, old-fashioned bullets. They were reliable, hard to jam, and humans had perfected them over thousands of years of warfare. Let me guess, he said. The Velthari use energy weapons. Plasma blades, particle beams, and personal shield technology, Park confirmed. They've mastered it over millennia, and they consider projectile weapons to be cowardly and primitive. Convenient timing for this treaty, Taejung observed. Very convenient. The Admiral leaned forward. The Velthari don't want humanity and the Council as equals. They want us as subordinates. This treaty ensures we arrive at every negotiation at a disadvantage. We'll be disarmed in every place that matters. Taejung was quiet for a moment, thinking, what do they use for close combat? When their energy weapons aren't practical? According to our intelligence, they rarely engage in close combat. Their culture considers it beneath them. They fight at range with their fancy plasma weapons. Park smiled slightly. Why do you ask? Just curious about the exact wording of this treaty, Taejung said. The Admiral's smile widened. She pulled up the treaty document and sent it to Taejung's datapad. I thought you might be. Read Section 7, Paragraph 3 carefully. Taejung scanned the document. The legal language was dense and boring, but he found the relevant section. His eyebrows rose. It specifically says projectile-based armaments, nothing about melee weapons or traditional arms. Exactly. Park stood and walked to the viewport. The Velthari have gotten lazy, Captain. They've been the dominant power for so long that they've forgotten how to think tactically. They see weapons as symbols of status, not tools for survival. And humans see them as tools, Taejung finished. Correct. The Admiral turned to face him. You're going to lead the human delegation to the first council meeting. Your mission is simple. Don't start a war, but don't let them walk over us either. Show them that humanity won't be pushed around. Taejung stood. I'll need some time to prepare. And I'll need access to the armory. Whatever you need, Park said. But Taejung? The whole galaxy will be watching. Make sure we make the right impression. Over the next 2 weeks, Taejung barely slept. He spent hours in his quarters reading every document about the Velthari he could find. Their culture, their history, their military tactics. He learned that they valued honor and direct confrontation. They despised weakness and respected strength. He also spent time with Lieutenant Ji-won Choi, his tactical officer. She was young but brilliant, with a mind that could find loopholes in anything. Together, they went through the Concordat Treaty word by word. It's actually quite sloppy, Ji-won said one night, highlighting sections on her display. They were so focused on banning guns that they left huge gaps. Explosive devices aren't mentioned. Neither are chemical weapons or biological agents. We won't use those, Taejung said firmly. That would make us look desperate. Then what will you use? She asked. Taejung smiled. I'm working on it. He visited the Indomitable's armory the next day. Master Sergeant Young-ho Kwon met him there. Kwon was in his 50s, scarred and grizzled, with hands that could snap necks or assemble a rifle in the dark. He specialized in close-quarters combat. I need knives, Taejung told him. Lots of them, Kwon raised an eyebrow. How many is lots? 47, the sergeant blinked. Sir? 47 different knives, Taejung repeated. Different types, different purposes. I need throwing knives, combat daggers, boot knives, neck knives. Some for fighting, some for show. Kwon was quiet for a long moment. Then he grinned. I think I understand, sir. Give me 2 days. Word spread quickly through the ship. Captain Kim was going to a diplomatic negotiation with 47 knives. His crew had mixed reactions. Some thought it was brilliant. Others thought he had lost his mind. Commander Bora Song, his second-in-command, confronted him in the corridor outside his quarters. Sir, with respect, you're going to look like a maniac, she said bluntly. Good, Dae-jung replied. Let them underestimate us. The Velthari won't see this as clever. They'll see it as an insult. They'll see it as whatever serves their purposes, Dae-jung said. Right now they think humanity is weak and primitive. They think we'll show up to this meeting terrified and unarmed. I intend to prove them wrong, Bora sighed. Just don't start a war, sir. That's exactly what the Admiral said. Dae-jung smiled. I'll do my best. On the final day before departure, Dr. Nari Han requested a meeting. She was the ship's xenolinguistics expert and would serve as his cultural attaché. She was nervous, wringing her hands as she sat across from him. Captain, I've studied the Velthari for 10 years, she said. They're proud and aggressive. If you show up armed like this, they might interpret it as a declaration of war. And if I show up defenseless? Dae-jung asked. They'll interpret it as submission. Then either way they'll interpret it however they want, he said. At least this way we control the narrative. Dr. Han nodded slowly. I hope you're right, sir. So do I, Dae-jung admitted. The morning they departed, Admiral Park gave him one final piece of advice. Remember, Captain, humans didn't survive thousands of years by being the strongest or the fastest. We survived by being smarter and more adaptable than everything that wanted to kill us. I won't forget, Dae-jung promised. As the shuttle detached from the Indomitable and set course for Velthar Prime, Dae-jung checked his equipment one last time. 47 knives, each secured in its own custom holster. Some were visible, most were hidden. Each one had a purpose. He was ready for war. He hoped it would be enough to keep the peace.